1995, and I'm still trying to get his approval. It's true and not true. I think that, I'm a student of A Course in Miracles.
Yeah.
That's really it.
So it's your spiritual life, that is the core of it.
Yeah.
Getting up every morning and saying, what can I do to
Well,
be
I
of
don't do that
service?
every morning. Although, do I do that every, yeah.
Yeah.
But
And midday and night.
The
before you go
Course
to
in
bed.
Miracles says all the children of God are special and none of the children of God are special. I do believe that, we talk about how nature has an intelligence, and nature is in every cell, and the embryo is programmed to become the baby, and the acorn is programmed to become the oak tree. You have written magnificently about many of those things. And I do believe that each and every one of us is programmed to become our highest creative possibility. And I have certainly learned as much from my failures as from my successes about both the drive that would lead me away from that higher possibility, but also that drive that leads me towards it. I've had many teachers such as yourself and friends such as yourself who have been like the Talmud when it talks about how over every blade of grass there is an angel saying, grow, grow, grow. You are an example of someone in my life who's been there for me in the successes and in the failures. And I think that's where we are now, is being with each other, lifting each other up when we need to be lifted up. I've had some rough spots, but I've had so many angels, both mortal and divine. And I also feel, you talk about the middle years. I think that, somebody told me when I turned 50 that that's the age past which you don't care what other people think anymore. And I've begun to think that turning 60 is the age past which you're going to say what you want to say, whatever they think. Like everyone I know, I don't say anything that everybody I know is saying. I just say it with the microphone on and in front of the lights. And I do think my father's happy.
And with the state of galloping headstone.
Thank you.
This is Louise and Shanti, very young Louise.
Gotta have good stuff.
Well, as she said, I've had occasion to be a sort of a chronic world traveler. To date, I've worked in 108 countries. And the airline travel is not getting any better, I can assure you. But one of the things that I have seen is the rise of women to full partnership with men in the whole domain of human affairs, perhaps the single most important event of the last 5,000 years. With very real backlash, and it's a work in progress, but I want to tell you a story about seeing it in 1987 in Africa. I was working in a village about 150 miles from Nairobi in Kenya, and the women had been up all night, women in the village, cooking, preparing a feast in our honor. Now, helping the people of this village had been a project of the ICA, the Institute of Cultural Affairs, with which I've been associated. And the ICA has a very long and wonderful history of creating ideal villages in so-called third world countries, really improving the social, the economic, the work conditions, and moving to a new equality between men and women, even in places where there has not been that equality for centuries. Well, before we actually sat down to eat the stiff porridge and stewed meats, the women danced for us, and then they sang, and then they propped up the drunken mayor of the town, good-naturedly sort of welcome us in very slurred, besotted speech. But there was no question the women were whispering, telling him what to say. Well, they seemed to be running the show, while he was clearly a cardboard fixture. Well, the school children rushed in, and many of them young girls in neat school uniforms, all wanting to try out their English on us. But in this village, what we saw, friends, was how seemingly minimal changes can affect the traditions of hundreds and even thousands of years. Because the ICA had helped the villagers build a tank to hold water. Now, what does this mean? The women no longer spent 80% of their time going down many, many miles to get the water and then coming back. And they had a new kind of freedom. And their first concern was bettering the life of the village. However, that meant that the great traditional women's culture, the mobile culture that grew up along their morning walks, the ambling culture of the water bearers, which had been focused on singing songs, telling stories, telling dirty jokes, trading gossip, trading healing knowledge, practical magic, powerful remedies, complaining about their husbands. It was a side-by-side culture. It was unfocused, laconic, diffused, in which the women would really just pour out their souls to each other as they walked. Well, with the water tank in the village, the women found that they missed their traditional walks. They needed to find other ways of getting together.
Jane Houston.
And now spending so much more time in the village, they had become acutely aware of all the things that needed changing, and now they had the energy to do something about it. "Sister," said one of them, "now that we women no longer have our side by side, we need a tea house where we can meet. Help us to build a tea house," which we did. Well, what happened over that? Now these women are face to face, very long periods of time over their tea. And this led to inevitable discussions and meetings around issues and projects which had replaced their former ambling relationship. This changed everything. But now, yes, they continued to dance and drum and sing, but it was to build up spirit for what they were intending to do to improve sanitation, the school, the lives of their men, many of whom were in Nairobi looking for work, but more often than not drunk on palm wine or in prison. And gradually the women had taken the leadership role. Cooking and singing and dancing, they were remaking virtually every aspect of their society. And as the woman led me around the village, I noticed things little and big that reflected astonishing change. The flies did not cluster over the children's eyes, and those eyes, unlike the impassive eyes of children that I have seen in villages without hope, these eyes were seeking and darting and filled with laughter and curiosity. The ever-present dogs were well-fed, even friendly. Where were the slinking, skeletal, feral creatures that had haunted the land? Even the beggars had vanished. Well-irrigated gardens flourished everywhere. Pipes were being laid down for sewage and drainage. The streets were swept. The school had been transformed from an ugly government issue affair into a merry place daubed with paint and children's drawings, giraffes, elephants, wildebeests. But one picture stood out. It was a powerful rendering of an old woman, her hair a halo of white, sitting up in what looked to be some kind of bed. I said, "Who is that?" "Well, that is the one we call..." And then she was the teacher, and she went back and forth. What should I say? "That is the one we call grandmother herself. Would you like to meet her?" "Oh, yes." And as we walked together to the little house where the venerable old woman lived, I learned that she was the guide, the envisioner, the inspiration for the women of the village. And as I bent down and stepped through the low doorway, I saw her and I knew her immediately. The wisdom lady, the good witch, the mistress of herbs, the brewer of healing drinks, the speaker for nature, the knower of the human heart, the visionary seer, the withering wit, the prophetess, the pragmatic genius, the social artist, the avatar of the local goddess, grandmother herself. Well, propped up on the pillows, she laughed and laughed and laughed when she saw our white faces. Then she beckoned us towards her. Well, someone gave us tea, you know, that strong African brew with milk and tea boiled together, and we settled around her. We knew that we were in the presence of the one who knows. And sometimes she talked to us, sometimes she addressed spirits and invisible but evidently available beings who were there. So she was moving very sweetly between a conversation between several worlds. Listen, she says, I don't have much more time before I too become an ancestor. So listen, the world has gone too crazy. It's time for women's ways to return. I talk to the ancestors, they advise me, and then I advise the women. And you see what has happened here. And she looked past me to someone who I thought was not there. Yes, grandmother, I'll tell them that. Well, she took my hand, and she kept brushing the skin, you know, just hoping to find some real color underneath. And she said, you all have new duties on this earth, you women. You have the responsibility to make the world work. The men aren't doing very well. We're growing strong. Soon there will be balance. Soon the men will look to you as equals, and together you will grow a new nest, and a nest of nests. The spirits will help you, especially the grandmother spirits. They have become very tough and powerful lately. But now you must support each other. You must work and pray and dance